My name is Sarah Chen, and what I'm about to share with you will make you question everything you believe about family loyalty. For 13 years, I poured my heart into our family's garden center, working weekends through high school, summers through college, and every spare moment I had as an adult. I helped build Chen's Garden Center from a small plant shop into Portland's premier landscaping business worth nearly $1 million. But when my parents decided to retire, they handed the entire operation to my younger sister Jessica, who had barely worked there for 6 months total, and then had the audacity to tell me I should continue working there for free to help her succeed. What happened next will shock you, and the way I fought back changed our family forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun streamed through my Pearl District apartment windows as I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee and reviewing quarterly reports for the marketing firm where I worked as an operations manager. At 29, I had built a solid career in Portland's competitive business landscape, earning enough to afford my own place and maintain the independent life I had fought so hard to create. My apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was mine, filled with plants from our family business and photographs documenting years of hard work at Chen's Garden Center. The irony wasn't lost on me that even in my personal space, reminders of the family business surrounded me, from the rare orchids I had propagated in our greenhouse to the custom planters I had designed during slow winter months. Life felt balanced and purposeful. My weekdays were spent optimizing business processes and managing client relationships at Morrison Marketing Solutions, while my weekends often found me still helping out at the garden center, unable to completely separate myself from the business that had shaped so much of who I was. I genuinely enjoyed both worlds. The corporate environment challenged my analytical mind, while the garden center connected me to something deeper, more rooted in family legacy and growing things from the ground up. My parents, David and Linda Chen, had always appreciated my dual expertise, often calling me for advice on everything from inventory management software to customer retention strategies. The garden center had been their dream since before I was born. Dad had immigrated from Taiwan with horticultural knowledge passed down through generations, while Mom brought her fierce business acumen and customer service philosophy that treated every visitor like family. Together, they had transformed a failing plant nursery in southeast Portland into a thriving enterprise that served both weekend gardeners and commercial landscaping contractors. The business occupied a prime corner lot near the trendy Hawthorne district, its greenhouse structures and outdoor display areas spanning nearly 2 acres of meticulously organized paradise. What made Chen's Garden Center special wasn't just the extensive plant inventory or the custom landscaping services. It was the reputation for expertise and reliability that had been built over nearly 30 decades. Regular customers would drive across town specifically to get advice from Dad about soil amendments or pest problems, while landscape contractors knew they could count on our wholesale pricing and consistent quality. Mom had developed relationships with suppliers across the Pacific Northwest, ensuring we always had the healthiest plants and the most competitive prices. The business had weathered economic downturns, seasonal fluctuations, and countless challenges through careful management and genuine passion for helping people create beautiful outdoor spaces. My connection to the business ran deeper than most people understood. While my sister Jessica had always been more interested in fashion, social media, and the creative aspects of marketing, I found myself drawn to the operational complexities that made everything work behind the scenes. During high school, I had spent countless hours learning about plant biology, soil chemistry, and integrated pest management. College summers meant working full-time at the center, handling everything from customer service to delivery coordination to financial record keeping. After graduation, even while building my corporate career, I continued contributing my expertise during evenings and weekends, helping modernize our point-of-sale system, developing customer relationship management protocols, and training new employees. The business had become profitable enough to support my parents comfortably, and they had begun talking more frequently about retirement plans. Dad was 63 and increasingly interested in travel, while Mom, at 60, wanted to pursue her long-delayed dream of studying watercolor painting. They had worked incredibly hard for nearly 30 decades, and I fully supported their desire to step back and enjoy the fruits of their labor. What I hadn't anticipated was how their retirement planning would completely blindside me and challenge everything I thought I understood about fairness, family, and the value of hard work. Jessica, my younger sister, had always been the family favorite in ways both obvious and subtle. While I was pragmatic and detail-oriented, she possessed natural charisma and an infectious enthusiasm that drew people to her effortlessly. Throughout our childhood, her achievements in theater, student government, and social activities had earned consistent praise, while my academic success and work ethic were simply expected rather than celebrated. This dynamic had continued into adulthood, with family gatherings often revolving around Jessica's latest adventures, career changes, or creative projects, while my steady professional growth received polite acknowledgement, but little genuine interest or excitement. The favoritism hadn't necessarily bothered me during our younger years, because Jessica and I had chosen such different paths. She thrived in environments that valued creativity, spontaneity, and interpersonal connection, while I found satisfaction in systems, processes, and measurable outcomes. We had developed a relationship that worked around our differences, supporting each other in our respective strengths while acknowledging that we approached life from fundamentally different perspectives. I had assumed this mutual respect and understanding would continue as we both entered our 30s and our parents began considering their legacy plans. Working at Morrison Marketing Solutions had taught me valuable lessons about succession planning, organizational development, and the importance of preparing next-generation leadership. I had seen family businesses thrive when transitions were handled thoughtfully, with clear communication about expectations, responsibilities, and ownership structures. I had also witnessed the devastating consequences when assumptions were made, conversations were avoided, or decisions were imposed without proper preparation. Professional experience had given me frameworks for thinking about business transitions that went far beyond simple parent-to-child transfers. My expertise in operations management had proven invaluable at the Garden Center, where I had implemented inventory tracking systems that reduced waste by 30%, developed seasonal staffing models that improved customer service during peak periods, and established vendor relationships that lowered costs while maintaining quality standards. These weren't glamorous contributions that generated immediate recognition, but they represented the foundational work that enabled the business to operate profitably and sustainably. I had also spent considerable time training newer employees, documenting processes, and creating systems that would allow the business to function effectively even when key people were absent. The relationship between my corporate career and my family business involvement had always felt complementary rather than conflicting. Skills developed in each environment enhanced my effectiveness in the other, creating a synergy that benefited everyone involved. My parents appreciated having someone in the family who understood both the emotional significance of their life's work and the practical realities of modern business operations. Colleagues at Morrison Marketing often sought my insights about small business challenges, recognizing that my hands-on experience provided perspective that couldn't be gained from textbooks or case studies alone. Portland's business community had begun to feel like home in ways that went beyond simple professional networking. The city's culture of supporting local enterprises, environmental consciousness, and collaborative entrepreneurship aligned perfectly with values I had absorbed growing up in a family business focused on helping people create sustainable, beautiful outdoor spaces. Chen's Garden Center had become a small but respected part of Portland's local business ecosystem, known for reliable service, expert advice, and genuine commitment to customer success rather than just sales volume. My apartment in the Pearl District represented independence and achievement that felt hard-earned and genuinely satisfying. The space was modest but thoughtfully arranged, with plants that showcased both my horticultural knowledge and
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
my appreciation for bringing natural beauty into urban living environments. Dinner parties with friends from work, quiet evenings spent reading business journals, and weekend mornings exploring Portland's farmers markets had created a lifestyle that balanced professional ambition with personal fulfillment. I felt grateful for the opportunities I had created and optimistic about future possibilities, both in my corporate career and in my continued involvement with the family business. The garden center occupied a unique position in Southeast Portland's evolving commercial landscape. While the Hawthorne district around us had gentrified significantly, transforming from a bohemian neighborhood into a destination for upscale shopping and dining, Chen's Garden Center had maintained its character as a place where serious gardeners could find both common plants and exotic specimens, along with the expertise to make them thrive. Regular customers included everyone from apartment dwellers seeking low-maintenance houseplants to landscape professionals sourcing materials for major commercial projects. What I loved most about working at the garden center was the diversity of challenges and the immediate connection between effort and results. Helping a nervous first-time gardener select appropriate plants for their shady backyard, troubleshooting irrigation problems for a commercial client, or working with Dad to design a custom greenhouse layout all required different skills but contributed to the same ultimate goal of helping people succeed with plants. The work felt meaningful in ways that corporate projects, despite their strategic importance, sometimes didn't match. My parents had built something special through decades of patient effort, careful reinvestment of profits, and genuine passion for their work. The business represented not just financial security, but also a legacy of service to their community and a testament to the possibilities available to immigrants willing to work incredibly hard for their dreams. Dad's knowledge of plant biology and traditional growing methods, combined with Mom's intuitive understanding of customer needs and market opportunities, had created an enterprise that succeeded because it genuinely helped people achieve their gardening and landscaping goals. The approaching transition felt like both an opportunity and a responsibility. An opportunity to see my parents finally enjoy the retirement they had earned through decades of 6-day work weeks and constant attention to business details. A responsibility to ensure that their life's work would continue thriving under new leadership, maintaining the reputation for quality and service that had taken so many years to establish. I felt ready to take on greater responsibilities at the garden center, perhaps eventually buying the business from my parents or entering into some kind of partnership arrangement that would provide them with retirement income while allowing me to build on the foundation they had created. Looking back, I realize how naive my assumptions were about family decision-making, fairness, and the relationship between contribution and recognition. I had operated under the belief that hard work, demonstrated competence, and consistent commitment would naturally translate into acknowledgement and opportunity. My experience in corporate environments had reinforced this belief, as promotions and increased responsibilities generally followed measurable performance and proven reliability. Family businesses, I would soon learn, operate according to different logic that doesn't always prioritize merit or preparation over other considerations. The morning that would change everything started just like hundreds of others, with coffee, financial reports, and optimistic planning for the day ahead. I had no idea that within hours, my understanding of my place in the family and my future would be completely upended by a conversation that revealed how differently my parents viewed my contributions and my sister's potential.
To choose between accepting injustice and fighting for what I believed I had earned. The call came on a Thursday afternoon while I was reviewing vendor contracts at Morrison Marketing. Mom's voice carried an unusual excitement that immediately caught my attention, the kind of breathless enthusiasm she typically reserved for announcing Jessica's latest accomplishments or sharing news about a particularly successful day at the garden center. She asked if I could come to dinner that Sunday, explaining that she and Dad had something important to discuss with both Jessica and me. The phrasing struck me as oddly formal for our family, which typically handled important conversations during regular Sunday dinners without advance notice or special invitations. Something in her tone suggested this wasn't going to be a casual family gathering. Mom spoke with the careful deliberation of someone who had rehearsed her words, choosing each phrase with unusual precision. When I asked if everything was okay, she quickly assured me that nothing was wrong, quite the opposite actually. They had wonderful news to share. The emphasis on wonderful felt forced, almost performative, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as me that whatever they had planned would be received positively by everyone involved. Dad's voice echoed in the background, adding something about finally being able to move forward with their retirement plans. This detail sent a small thrill of anticipation through me. For months, I had been hoping they would begin serious succession planning conversations, imagining detailed discussions about transition timelines, responsibility transfers, and ownership structures. My experience at Morrison Marketing had taught me that successful business transitions required careful planning, clear communication, and thoughtful consideration of everyone's interests and capabilities. The weekend passed with unusual slowness, my mind returning repeatedly to the upcoming family meeting. I found myself mentally preparing for various scenarios, from simple retirement announcements to more complex discussions about selling the business to outside buyers. The possibility that they might want to keep the business in the family felt both exciting and daunting. I had always assumed that if such an opportunity arose, it would involve extensive conversations about my readiness, my vision for the business, and the practical details of taking over operations. Sunday dinner preparations felt different than usual. Mom had prepared an elaborate meal featuring Dad's favorite dishes, and the dining room had been set with the good china, typically reserved for holidays or special guests. Fresh flowers from the garden center adorned the table, creating an atmosphere that felt both celebratory and slightly ceremonial. Jessica arrived fashionably late, as always, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a new outfit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The conversation during dinner remained carefully neutral, avoiding any mention of the important topic Mom had referenced. Instead, we discussed Jessica's latest freelance marketing projects, Dad's recent success propagating rare orchid varieties, and Mom's progress in her watercolor painting class. The normalcy felt artificial, like everyone was performing their usual family roles while waiting for the real conversation to begin. I noticed Dad glancing at Mom frequently, as if seeking confirmation about timing or approach. After dessert, Mom cleared her throat and announced it was time for their big news. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, as she explained that she and Dad had finally made their decision about retirement and the future of Chen's Garden Center. They had spent months discussing their options, consulting with their accountant, and carefully considering what would be best for both the business and the family. The careful build-up suggested they expected their announcement to be met with enthusiasm and gratitude. Dad took over the narrative, explaining their reasoning with the methodical approach he typically applied to complex horticultural problems. They had concluded that the business needed young energy and fresh perspectives to continue thriving in Portland's competitive market. The garden center had grown beyond what two people could effectively manage, and they wanted to ensure it would continue serving the community for decades to come. His words carried the weight of carefully considered logic, as if he was presenting the conclusion of a scientific experiment rather than a family decision. The announcement, when it finally came, felt like a physical blow. They had decided to turn over full ownership and management of Chen's Garden Center to Jessica, effective immediately. Mom beamed as she described Jessica's natural charisma, her marketing expertise, and her ability to connect with younger customers who represented the future of their client base. Dad nodded approvingly as he outlined Jessica's vision for modernizing their social media presence, expanding their event hosting capabilities, and developing new revenue streams through workshops and corporate team-building activities. Jessica's response was everything our parents had hoped for. She gasped with delight, immediately launching into an enthusiastic description of ideas she had been developing for months. She talked about transforming the garden center into a lifestyle destination, complete with Instagram-worthy photo opportunities, artisanal plant arrangements, and collaborative events with other local businesses. Her excitement was genuine and infectious, and I could see why our parents found her vision appealing. What stunned me into silence was the casual way they mentioned my continued involvement.
Of course, they expected I would want to help Jessica succeed by continuing to contribute my operational expertise and industry knowledge. After all, I had always been so dedicated to the family business, and Jessica would need my support during the transition period. They spoke as if my participation was a foregone conclusion, a natural extension of the help I had always provided without any formal recognition or compensation. The assumption that I would work for free to support Jessica's ownership felt breathtaking in its presumption. 13 years of unpaid contributions, countless weekends and evenings spent improving systems and training employees, extensive knowledge about suppliers and customers, and deep understanding of the business operations were apparently viewed as something I should continue providing without any ownership stake or formal compensation. The message was clear. Jessica would own and profit from the business, while I would continue serving as an unpaid consultant and operational support person. My initial shock prevented any immediate response. I sat at the
Familiar dining room table, surrounded by the same family photographs and keepsakes that had witnessed countless previous conversations, trying to process the magnitude of what had just been announced. The careful planning I had imagined, the detailed discussions about qualifications and readiness, the consideration of who had contributed most to the business's success, none of that had apparently factored into their decision-making process. Jessica's continued enthusiasm filled the silence that followed my parents' announcement. She was already making plans for renovations, describing how she would reorganize the retail space to create better flow and more appealing displays. Her ideas weren't without merit. She did have genuine marketing insights and a good eye for visual presentation. But the gap between her limited operational experience and the complexity of actually running a business worth nearly $1 million seemed vast and potentially dangerous. Dad attempted to address what he must have sensed was my surprise by explaining that they had always planned for both of us to be involved in whatever succession plan they developed. Jessica would handle the creative and customer-facing aspects of the business, while I would continue managing the operational and financial elements that had always been my strength. It was presented as a natural division of labor that would allow both of us to contribute our best abilities to the family enterprise. The fundamental inequality of this arrangement was apparently invisible to them. Jessica would own the business, make all major decisions, and receive all profits, while I would provide essential services for free based on some nebulous concept of family obligation. The years I had spent building systems, developing vendor relationships, and creating the operational foundation that enabled the business to function profitably were treated as a gift I had given freely and should continue giving without expectation of recognition or reward. Mom seemed to interpret my silence as contemplation rather than shock. She launched into a detailed explanation of why Jessica was the perfect choice to leave the business into the future. Her youth and energy would attract new customers, her social media skills would expand their market reach, and her natural creativity would help them stay competitive in an evolving industry. Every positive quality Jessica possessed was presented as evidence of her suitability for ownership, while my contributions were framed as supporting services rather than leadership qualifications. The conversation continued for another hour with Jessica and our parents discussing timeline details, renovation plans, and marketing strategies. I contributed minimal responses, still trying to understand how 13 years of dedicated involvement had translated into an expectation that I would continue working for free under Jessica's ownership. The casual assumption that this arrangement would be acceptable to me revealed how little they understood about fairness, recognition, or the value of my contributions. Driving home that evening, I found myself replaying the conversation obsessively, searching for signs I had missed or alternative interpretations of what had been said. The fundamental facts remained unchanged. Jessica would own the business despite minimal prior involvement, while I would be expected to continue providing essential services without compensation or recognition. The injustice felt overwhelming, compounded by the realization that our parents genuinely believed they had crafted a perfect solution that honored both daughters' abilities. The following week brought a series of phone calls and text messages from Jessica, eager to begin discussing operational details and transition planning. Her excitement remained undimmed by any apparent awareness of the inequality built into the arrangement. She spoke as if we were embarking on a collaborative adventure, seemingly oblivious to the fact that she would own everything while I would own nothing. Her enthusiasm for her new role as owner was matched only by her casual assumption that I would help her succeed without requiring formal recognition or compensation. My attempts to process the situation with friends and colleagues revealed the stark contrast between family business dynamics and professional norms. Everyone I spoke with expressed disbelief that parents would give a business to a child with minimal experience while expecting another child with extensive expertise to work for free. The arrangement violated every principle of fairness and business logic that governed professional environments. Amanda Foster, my colleague at Morrison Marketing, listened to my account with growing incredulity. She had experience with family business consulting and immediately recognized the dysfunction in what my parents had proposed. Her questions helped clarify aspects of the situation that I had been too shocked to analyze thoroughly. Why hadn't they considered my years of contribution when making their decision? What qualifications did Jessica possess that outweighed my operational expertise? How did they expect the business to maintain its current success without recognizing or compensating the person who had built most of its systems? The more I discussed the situation with outside perspectives, the clearer it became that my parents' decision was fundamentally unfair and potentially damaging to the business they claimed to want to preserve. Jessica's marketing skills and charismatic personality were genuine assets, but they didn't substitute for the deep operational knowledge and vendor relationships that kept the business running day to day. Their plan seemed to assume that these essential elements would continue functioning through my unpaid labor, an assumption that revealed shocking disregard for my time, expertise, and career interests. Sleep became difficult as I wrestled with the implications of accepting or rejecting their proposal. Accepting would mean sacrificing my own interests to support Jessica's unearned ownership, while rejecting it might mean watching the family business decline without the operational foundation I had helped create. Neither option felt acceptable, yet those seemed to be the only choices my parents had left available. Marcus Rodriguez, my college friend who had become a successful business attorney, offered to meet for coffee to discuss the legal and practical aspects of my situation. His professional perspective provided clarity about options I hadn't considered and rights I didn't know I possessed. The conversation would prove to be the first step toward understanding that I didn't have to accept the unfair arrangement my parents had imposed, and that fighting back might be both possible and necessary. The week between the family dinner and my meeting with Marcus felt like a suspended period of disbelief and growing anger.
Day brought new reminders of the years I had invested in the garden center, from the customer relationships I had built, to the systems I had designed, to the problems I had solved. The casual dismissal of all that contribution in favor of Jessica's untested potential felt like a betrayal that cut deeper than simple business unfairness. Jessica's continued enthusiasm in planning calls only emphasized the magnitude of what was at stake. She spoke confidently about changes she wanted to make, customers she wanted to target, and revenue opportunities she wanted to pursue. Her ideas weren't necessarily bad, but they reflected a superficial understanding of the business that ignored the complex operational realities that made success possible. The disconnect between her ambitious vision and her limited understanding of day-to-day business requirements became more apparent with each conversation. My parents called several times during the week, ostensibly to check on how I was feeling about their announcement, but actually to reinforce their expectation that I would support Jessica's ownership. Mom spoke about family loyalty and the importance of helping each other succeed. Dad focused on the business benefits of our combined skills and the competitive advantages that would result from our collaboration. Neither seemed to recognize that collaboration implies equality and mutual benefit, not the one-sided arrangement they had proposed. The growing certainty that I could not accept their proposal brought its own anxiety. Rejecting their plan would likely create family conflict that could have lasting consequences, but accepting it would mean abandoning my own interests and principles in favor of maintaining family harmony. The choice between fairness and family peace felt impossible, yet increasingly necessary as the reality of their decisions sank in. By the time I met with Marcus at a coffee shop in Northwest Portland, I had concluded that something had to change. I couldn't accept working for free to support Jessica's unearned ownership, but I also couldn't simply walk away from 13 years of investment without exploring every possible option. Marcus would help me understand what those options might be and how to pursue them effectively. The conversation with Marcus would mark the beginning of my transformation from shocked family member to determined advocate for my own interests. The naive assumption that family decisions would naturally consider fairness and merit
was about to be replaced by a more realistic understanding of power dynamics and the importance of standing up for myself when others wouldn't. Parts 6 through 9. External verification through context gathering. The coffee shop in Northwest Portland buzzed with the typical Thursday afternoon energy of freelancers, students, and business professionals meeting between more formal appointments. Marcus Rodriguez arrived exactly on time, his familiar confidence and sharp business attire a reminder of how far we had both traveled since our college days studying business administration together. He ordered his usual double espresso while I nursed a latte that had long since grown cold, my appetite for anything having disappeared sometime during the sleepless nights following my parents' announcement. Marcus had built a reputation as one of Portland's most effective business attorneys, specializing in family enterprise disputes and succession planning gone wrong. His success stemmed partly from his analytical mind and partly from his genuine empathy for clients caught in the emotional crossfire of family business conflicts. When I had called him earlier in the week, his immediate availability and serious tone suggested he understood the gravity of what I was facing even before I provided the details. Settling into a corner table that offered privacy from the ambient noise, Marcus pulled out a legal pad and encouraged me to start from the beginning. His initial questions focused on establishing the timeline of my involvement with Chen's Garden Center, the specific contributions I had made over the years, and the formal or informal agreements that had governed my participation. As I described 13 years of unpaid labor, system development, and operational improvements, his expression shifted from professional interest to obvious concern. The legal framework surrounding my situation was more complex than I had initially understood. Marcus explained that family businesses operate in a gray area where emotional relationships, informal agreements, and business law intersect in ways that can create both opportunities and vulnerabilities. While my years of unpaid contribution didn't automatically entitle me to ownership, they did establish what lawyers call quantum meruit claims, essentially arguing that I had provided valuable services with the reasonable expectation of future compensation or recognition. More importantly, Marcus helped me understand that my parents' decision, while legally their right as current owners, raised serious questions about their fiduciary responsibilities and the sustainability of their chosen succession plan. His experience with similar cases had taught him that family businesses rarely survive transitions where operational expertise is separated from ownership authority, especially when the person with the expertise feels betrayed or undervalued by the arrangement. Marcus spent considerable time exploring the financial aspects of the business, asking detailed questions about revenue streams, profit margins, asset valuation, and debt obligations. My ability to answer these questions in detail served as evidence of my intimate knowledge of the business operations, knowledge that would be extremely difficult for Jessica to replicate quickly. The conversation revealed not only my qualifications for business ownership, but also the potential risks of transferring control to someone without equivalent operational understanding. The documentation I had maintained over the years, largely for my own organizational purposes, suddenly took on legal significance. Marcus was particularly interested in email communications with vendors, customer relationship records, system improvement proposals, and financial analysis I had prepared for my parents. These materials could serve as evidence of my substantial contribution to the business's success and my legitimate expectations about future involvement in ownership or management decisions. Our discussion also explored the broader family dynamics that had led to my parents' decision. Marcus had seen enough family business disputes to recognize the patterns of favoritism, gender bias, and generational misunderstanding that often influenced succession planning. His questions helped me articulate aspects of our family relationships that I had previously accepted as normal, but which actually represented systematic undervaluation of my contributions compared to Uriel's evident position as the heir apparent and my held position to the business successes. As the conversation became more focused on the aimless state of the business, I emphatically stated that if there was conflict to be found over becoming part owner, I would deny and move on.
Jessica's potential. The legal options available to me ranged from informal negotiation to formal litigation, each carrying different costs, risks, and potential outcomes. Marcus explained that family business disputes often escalated quickly once legal action began, sometimes destroying relationships permanently while providing uncertain financial remedies. However, he also emphasized that accepting unfair treatment without resistance rarely led to improved situations and often encouraged further exploitation. One particularly revealing aspect of our conversation focused on the business valuation and succession planning process my parents had apparently undertaken.
Marcus's questions revealed that they had likely consulted with professionals about tax implications, ownership transfer mechanisms, and legal structures for the transition. The fact that these consultations hadn't included consideration of my interests or contributions suggested either incomplete professional advice or deliberate exclusion of relevant information. Marcus recommended that I gather additional documentation before making any decisions about how to respond to my parents' proposal. Specifically, he wanted me to understand the full scope of the business's financial position, any existing legal obligations or agreements, and the specific terms of whatever arrangement my parents had formalized with Jessica. This information would be essential for evaluating my options and determining the strongest basis for any claims I might want to pursue. The meeting concluded with Marcus offering to conduct a preliminary investigation into the business's legal and financial status. His professional network included forensic accountants, business appraisers, and succession planning specialists who could provide objective analysis of the situation. While such services would involve some cost, Marcus argued that understanding the full picture was essential before making decisions that could affect my financial future and family relationships for decades. Driving back to my Pearl District apartment, I felt simultaneously relieved and apprehensive. Relieved because Marcus had confirmed that my sense of injustice was legally and ethically justified, not simply the result of hurt feelings or unrealistic expectations. Apprehensive because his analysis suggested that resolving the situation would require confronting my family more directly than I had ever imagined possible. The following morning brought an unexpected call from Aunt Patricia, my father's sister who had maintained the books for Chen's Garden Center during its early years before transitioning to her own accounting practice. Patty had always been the family truth teller, someone whose practical wisdom and professional experience provided perspective that cut through emotional complications. Her call, ostensibly to check on how I was feeling about the big family news, carried an undertone that suggested she had her own concerns about my parents' decision. Patty invited me to lunch at her favorite Vietnamese restaurant in Southeast Portland, a casual place where we had shared many conversations over the years about business, family, and life in general. Her suggestion that we meet away from family venues felt significant, implying that she wanted to discuss topics that might not be appropriate for more public family settings. The invitation itself suggested that not everyone in our extended family viewed my parents' succession plan as the perfect solution they had presented. Our lunch conversation began with Patty's characteristic directness. She had been thinking about my parents' announcement since hearing about it from my mother, and several aspects of their decision troubled her from both family and business perspectives. Her concerns weren't based on favoritism or family politics, but on practical questions about business sustainability and fairness that her accounting background had trained her to recognize. Patty had maintained professional relationships with many family businesses throughout her career, and she had witnessed both successful and disastrous succession transitions. Her experience had taught her that sustainable transitions required careful attention to competency, preparation, and stakeholder interests. My parents' plan violated several principles that she considered essential for business continuity and family harmony. Most significantly, Patty revealed information about the business's financial position that my parents hadn't shared during their announcement. The garden center had been more profitable over the past several years than they had indicated, generating sufficient cash flow to support not only their comfortable retirement, but also significant investment in facility improvements and inventory expansion. The business was not struggling or in need of rescue by a charismatic new owner. It was thriving under current management and operational systems. This financial strength made my parents' decision even more puzzling from a business perspective. Successful enterprises typically reward and retain the people responsible for their success, not replace them with less experienced alternatives. Patty's questions about the reasoning behind their choice echoed Marcus's legal analysis and reinforced my growing conviction that the decision was fundamentally flawed. More troubling was Patty's revelation about conversations she had overheard between my parents regarding their succession planning. Apparently, they had been discussing the transition for more than a year, consulting with various advisors about tax implications and legal structures. Throughout these discussions, Jessica's ownership had been assumed rather than evaluated. while my role had been consistently framed as supportive rather than leadership-oriented. The systematic exclusion of my interests from their planning process felt like a deeper betrayal than the announcement itself. For months, while I had continued contributing my time and expertise under the assumption that my efforts were building towards some form of future recognition, they had been planning to formalize an arrangement that would permanently subordinate my interests to Jessica's ownership. The deception involved not just the final decision, but the entire process that had led to it. Patty also shared concerns about Jessica's readiness for the responsibilities of business ownership. While she genuinely liked Jessica and appreciated her creativity and enthusiasm, she questioned whether those qualities provided sufficient foundation for managing a complex operation with significant financial obligations, employee responsibilities, and customer relationships. The gap between charismatic marketing skills and comprehensive business management represented a risk that could jeopardize everything my parents had built. Our conversation revealed that other family members had similar concerns but felt hesitant to voice them directly.
Taking my contributions for granted extended beyond my immediate parents to include relatives who genuinely cared about both the business's future and our family relationships. The reluctance to challenge my parents' decision reflected both respect for their authority and fear of creating conflict that could damage family unity. Patty's professional perspective provided a framework for understanding why my parents' decision felt so wrong despite their good intentions. Business transitions that ignore merit in favor of preference rarely succeed, regardless of the family relationships involved. Her experience with similar situations had taught her that emotional favoritism often led to business failures that ultimately hurt everyone involved, including the favored family members who received responsibilities they weren't prepared to handle. The lunch conversation also explored potential solutions that might address both my interests and the family's desire to keep the business within our generation. Patty suggested that partnership structures, phased ownership transitions, or performance-based arrangements might provide alternatives to the all-or-nothing approach my parents had proposed. Her ideas offered hope that creative solutions might be possible if all parties were willing to consider more complex but fairer arrangements. As our meal concluded, Patty offered to facilitate conversations with my parents about alternative succession plans. Her professional credibility and family relationships positioned her to raise concerns that might be dismissed if they came directly from me. However, she also warned that such interventions could be successful only if my parents were genuinely open to reconsidering their decision rather than simply looking for ways to convince me to accept it. The combination of Marcus's legal analysis and Patty's family business insights provided a comprehensive picture of my situation that was both empowering and daunting. Empowering because professional perspectives confirmed that my sense of injustice was valid and that options existed for addressing it. Daunting because pursuing those options would require confronting family relationships and business dynamics that had operated unchanged for decades. That evening, I reviewed the documentation Marcus had requested, organizing emails, financial records, and project summaries that demonstrated the scope and value of my contributions to Chen's Garden Center. The exercise was both satisfying and painful. Satisfying because it provided concrete evidence of my legitimate claims, and painful because it revealed how much of my life I had invested in a business that my parents were prepared to give away without recognizing my contributions. The materials painted a clear picture of someone who had functioned as an unpaid general manager for more than a decade, someone whose expertise and efforts had contributed substantially to the business's current success and market position. The documentation also revealed the informal nature of most family business relationships, where handshake agreements and assumed understandings replace the formal contracts that govern professional environments. Jessica called that evening, eager to discuss timeline details for what she described as our transition. Her continued assumption that I would participate enthusiastically in an arrangement that provided me with no ownership or compensation felt increasingly insulting rather than simply naive. The conversation reinforced my growing conviction that accepting her ownership without formal recognition of my interests would be both personally degrading and professionally destructive. My attempts to raise concerns about the proposed arrangement were met with Jessica's characteristic optimism and dismissal of practical complications. She seemed genuinely unable to understand why I would need formal recognition or compensation for contributions that had always been provided as family support. Her perspective reflected the same blind spot that had led to my parents' decision, an inability to recognize that years of professional-level work deserved professional-level recognition. The following week brought additional conversations with Marcus about the specific legal and financial steps required to protect my interests. His preliminary investigation had revealed that my parents had indeed consulted with succession planning professionals, but their discussions had focused primarily on tax minimization rather than comprehensive stakeholder analysis. The professional advice they had received was technically sound, but incomplete because it didn't address the sustainability risks of their chosen approach. Marcus also connected me with Amanda Foster, a business consultant who specialized in family enterprise dynamics and succession planning. Amanda's expertise complemented Marcus's legal knowledge by providing insights into the psychological and organizational factors that influenced family business decisions. Her experience with similar situations would prove invaluable for understanding not just what had happened, but why it had happened and what might be possible going forward. The consultation with Amanda took place at her downtown Portland office, a professional environment that felt worlds away from the emotional complexity of family business relationships. Her systematic approach to analyzing family enterprise dynamics provided structure for understanding patterns that I had experienced but never fully recognized. The conversation would prove to be another crucial step in my journey from shocked family member to informed advocate for my own interests. Amanda's questions explored not just the immediate succession planning crisis, but the broader family patterns that had created conditions for such an unfair decision. Her analysis would help me understand that fighting for recognition wasn't just about the garden center ownership, but about challenging decades of systematic undervaluation that had affected multiple aspects of my relationship with my family.
Standing patterns of communication, recognition, and power distribution that had been developing for decades. The psychological profile that emerged from our discussions revealed dynamics that I had lived with, but never analyzed systematically. Amanda identified what she called invisible labor syndrome, a pattern where one family member's contributions become so consistent and reliable that they fade into the background of family consciousness. My 13 years of unpaid operational support had become so normalized that my parents genuinely couldn't see why formal recognition would be necessary or appropriate. More disturbing was Amanda's analysis of gender dynamics within our family structure. Her experience with Asian American family businesses had taught her to recognize cultural patterns where daughters were often expected to provide support without claiming authority, while sons or more charismatic family members were positioned for leadership roles regardless of their qualifications or contributions. My parents' decision reflected these unconscious biases, even though they would have denied any intentional discrimination. Amanda's framework for understanding family business succession helped me recognize that my parents weren't deliberately trying to harm me, but were operating from assumptions about family roles, gender expectations, and business leadership that they had never examined critically. This insight provided some emotional relief while also clarifying why logical arguments about fairness and merit hadn't influenced their decision-making process. The documentation review Amanda conducted revealed a pattern of gradual responsibility expansion that had never been accompanied by corresponding authority or recognition increases. Over the years, I had assumed more and more operational duties while my formal status remained unchanged. This incremental exploitation had been so gradual that none of us had recognized how substantially my role had evolved or how inappropriate it had become to expect continued service without formal acknowledgement.
Amanda's analysis also explored the business risks inherent in my parents' succession plan. Her research on family enterprise transitions indicated that businesses rarely survived transfers of ownership to inexperienced family members, especially when operational expertise was expected to be provided by disenfranchised siblings or relatives. The statistical probability of Chen's Garden Center thriving under Jessica's ownership without my committed participation was discouragingly low. Our conversations extended over several sessions as Amanda helped me develop what she called a stakeholder analysis that identified all the parties who would be affected by various potential outcomes. Beyond my immediate family, the analysis included employees who depended on the business for their livelihoods, customers who relied on our expertise and service, suppliers who had built relationships based on trust and reliability, and the broader Portland community that benefited from our local business presence. This broader perspective helped me understand that fighting for fair treatment wasn't selfish, but actually served the interests of multiple stakeholders who would suffer if the business declined under inexperienced management. Amanda's framework transformed my sense of obligation from family duty to broader responsibility for protecting an enterprise that supported many people beyond our immediate family circle. The strategic planning process Amanda facilitated was both comprehensive and emotionally challenging. We developed multiple scenarios ranging from complete acceptance of my parents' plan to formal legal action demanding ownership recognition. Each scenario included detailed analysis of likely costs, benefits, risks, and long-term consequences for both business and family relationships. Amanda's professional recommendation was clear. The current proposal was unsustainable and unfair, but any response strategy needed to provide face-saving opportunities for my parents while protecting my legitimate interests. She suggested a phased approach that would begin with professional mediation and escalate only if reasonable alternatives were rejected. This strategy would demonstrate good faith effort to preserve family relationships while establishing clear boundaries about what I would and wouldn't accept. The emotional preparation for confronting my family proved as important as the strategic planning. Amanda helped me understand that my parents' initial reaction would likely be defensive, possibly including attempts to guilt me into compliance by emphasizing family loyalty over individual fairness. Anticipating these responses and preparing appropriate counterarguments would be essential for maintaining my resolve when emotional pressure intensified. Amanda also connected me with Dr. Maria Santos, a family therapist who specialized in business-related conflicts. Dr. Santos helped me process the grief and anger I felt about my parents' decision while developing communication strategies that could express my position clearly without damaging relationships permanently. Her insights about family systems and communication patterns proved invaluable for preparing me to advocate effectively for my interests. The weeks of professional consultation and strategic planning had transformed my understanding of the situation from personal family drama to complex business and legal challenge. Armed with comprehensive analysis from Marcus, Patty, Amanda, and Dr. Santos, I felt prepared to present my case with confidence and clarity. The decision to fight for fair treatment was no longer impulsive emotional reaction, but calculated strategic choice based on thorough professional advice. Marcus completed his legal research and documentation compilation, producing a comprehensive brief that outlined my potential claims and the evidence supporting them. His analysis confirmed that I had strong grounds for demanding formal recognition of my contributions, either through ownership participation or substantial compensation for past services. The legal framework provided leverage for negotiations while establishing fallback positions if informal resolution proved impossible. The confrontation I had been preparing for began with a phone call to my parents requesting a family meeting to discuss concerns about their succession plan. Mom's immediate defensive tone suggested they had anticipated resistance and prepared their own responses. However, their preparation had apparently focused on emotional arguments about family loyalty rather than substantive analysis of business sustainability or fairness issues.
I arranged for the meeting to take place at Marcus's law office, a neutral location that would emphasize the professional nature of the discussion and discourage purely emotional responses.
The decision to involve legal representation from the outset sent a clear message that I was serious about protecting my interests and had professional support for my position. The family meeting itself was one of the most difficult conversations of my life. My parents arrived expecting to convince me to accept their decision through combination of emotional appeals and practical arguments about Jessica's potential. Instead, they encountered comprehensive legal and business analysis that challenged every assumption underlying their succession plan. Marcus presented the documentation of my contributions with methodical precision, demonstrating both the scope of my involvement and the value I had provided to the business over 13 years. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, creating visible discomfort for my parents as they confronted the magnitude of what they had been taking for granted. Dad's initial response focused on family relationships and the importance of supporting Jessica's success. He seemed genuinely puzzled by my demand for formal recognition, suggesting that family members shouldn't need contracts or legal agreements to work together effectively. His perspective reflected generational and cultural assumptions about family business operations that hadn't adapted to modern realities about individual rights and professional standards. Mom's approach was more emotional, emphasizing the sacrifices they had made to build the business and their right to decide its future as they saw fit. Her arguments revealed the depth of her investment in Jessica's success and her inability to understand why I wouldn't want to help my sister achieve her dreams. The conversation became increasingly heated as my parents realized that I wasn't seeking minor modifications to their plan, but challenging its fundamental fairness. Jessica's participation in the meeting was perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the entire confrontation. She arrived expecting to discuss operational details and transition timelines, but instead found herself at the center of a family crisis that challenged her anticipated ownership. Her genuine shock at learning about the legal and practical problems with the succession plan revealed how little she understood about the complexity of business ownership and management. The revelation that I might not participate in supporting her ownership forced Jessica to confront aspects of the business that she had never considered seriously. Her marketing vision and social media expertise were genuine assets, but they represented perhaps 5% of the knowledge and skills required to operate Chen's Garden Center successfully. The remaining 95% had been my invisible contribution that she had simply assumed would continue indefinitely. Marcus's presentation of alternative succession options provided a framework for potential compromise that could address my concerns while preserving family relationships. His suggestions included partnership arrangements, performance-based ownership transitions, buy-in opportunities, and profit-sharing agreements that would recognize my contributions while allowing Jessica to develop her leadership capabilities gradually. However, my parents' response to these alternatives revealed the depth of their commitment to their original decision. They seemed willing to consider modifications that would make me more comfortable with the arrangement, but unwilling to fundamentally alter their plan to give Jessica immediate full ownership. Their inflexibility forced the realization that compromise might not be possible, and that more dramatic action could become necessary. The meeting concluded with my delivery of an ultimatum that surprised even me with its clarity and firmness. I would not continue working for the business, paid or unpaid, unless my contributions were formally recognized through ownership participation or substantial compensation. I gave them 2 weeks to develop a counter-proposal that addressed my concerns, or I would pursue legal action to protect my interests. The immediate aftermath of the family meeting was devastating. My parents were furious at what they perceived as betrayal and ingratitude. Jessica was hurt and confused by the collapse of her business dreams. Extended family members who learned about the conflict were divided between sympathy for my position and concern about family unity.
The comfortable dynamics that had governed our relationships for decades were shattered, replaced by legal positioning and formal communication. The 2 weeks following my ultimatum passed slowly, filled with tense phone calls, emotional letters, and family members attempting to broker compromises that would satisfy everyone. However, the fundamental inequality of the original plan remained unchanged in all proposed modifications. My parents seemed incapable of recognizing that token gestures couldn't address the systemic unfairness of expecting me to support Jessica's ownership without receiving appropriate recognition. When the deadline passed without acceptable counterproposals, Marcus filed formal legal action demanding either ownership participation commensurate with my contributions or financial compensation for 13 years of unpaid professional services. The lawsuit transformed family disagreement into public legal proceeding that attracted unwanted attention to our personal relationships and business affairs. The litigation process was emotionally exhausting, but strategically necessary. Discovery proceedings revealed financial records and business documents that supported my claims while exposing the casual way my parents had planned the succession without considering my interests. Expert witnesses testified about the value of operational expertise and the typical compensation for business management services. More importantly, the legal pressure forced my parents to confront the reality that their plan couldn't succeed without my participation. Jessica's attempts to operate the business independently during the conflict period demonstrated her lack of preparation for comprehensive management responsibilities. Customer complaints increased, vendor relationships deteriorated, and operational efficiency declined as the complex systems I had developed began breaking down. The turning point came when one of our largest commercial landscaping clients threatened to terminate their contract due to service problems and communication failures. The potential loss of revenue that this client represented would have seriously damaged the business's financial position and market reputation. My parents finally recognized that their idealistic vision of Jessica's ownership was colliding with practical realities they hadn't anticipated. Formal mediation sessions facilitated by a retired business judge provided the framework for reaching a resolution that addressed most of my concerns,
while allowing my parents to preserve some dignity and Jessica to maintain involvement in the business. The final agreement granted me 40% ownership of Chen's Garden Center in recognition of my historical contributions, with Jessica receiving 30% ownership and our parents retaining 30% during their lifetime. The ownership structure included provisions for Jessica to earn additional equity through demonstrated performance over a 5-year period, creating incentives for her to develop the operational competencies required for business leadership. Management responsibilities were divided according to our respective strengths, with me handling operations and finance, while Jessica focused on marketing and customer development. The financial settlement also included substantial compensation for my past unpaid services, funded through business profits over a 3-year period. This recognition of historical contributions provided some measure of justice while avoiding immediate cash flow problems for the business. The agreement established clear policies for future family member involvement, preventing similar exploitation from occurring. Implementation of the new ownership and management structure required months of careful transition work. Jessica and I had to rebuild our working relationship while learning to navigate the complexities of shared ownership and divided responsibilities. The process was occasionally tense, but ultimately successful as we developed mutual respect for each other's contributions and abilities. The business itself benefited from the resolution, as the combination of my operational expertise and Jessica's marketing innovation created synergies that neither of us could have achieved alone. Customer satisfaction improved, revenue increased, and employee morale stabilized as clear leadership structures replaced the confusion that had characterized the transition period. My relationship with my parents required more time to heal, as they struggled to accept that their decision had been fundamentally flawed and harmful.
However, the success of the revised arrangement eventually provided evidence that my resistance had been necessary and beneficial for everyone involved, including Jessica, whose gradual development of business skills proceeded more successfully than immediate full responsibility would have allowed. The experience taught me invaluable lessons about the importance of recognizing and protecting my own interests, especially in family contexts where exploitation can be disguised as loyalty or tradition. Professional support from Marcus, Amanda, Dr. Santos, and other advisors had been essential for developing the knowledge and confidence required to challenge unfair treatment effectively. Looking back on the conflict and its resolution, I realized that standing up for fair treatment had ultimately served everyone's interests better than accepting the original unfair arrangement. The business was more successful, Jessica was better prepared for leadership responsibilities, and family relationships, while changed, had become more honest and equitable. The broader lesson I learned was that family businesses required the same attention to fairness, competency, and sustainability that governs other professional environments. Emotional relationships and family loyalty are important considerations, but they cannot substitute for sound business practices and equitable treatment of all stakeholders. My advice to others facing similar situations is to seek professional help early, document contributions carefully, and remember that protecting your interests often serves the broader good better than accepting unfair treatment. Family relationships may be tested by such conflicts, but relationships based on mutual respect and fair treatment are ultimately stronger than those that depend on one person's sacrifice for another's benefit. The transformation of Chen's Garden Center from family crisis to successful partnership demonstrated that creative solutions are possible when all parties are willing to prioritize fairness and business sustainability over rigid initial positions. The process was difficult and occasionally painful, but the results justified the effort and provided a foundation for long-term success. Today, 3 years after the resolution, I can honestly say that fighting for fair treatment was one of the most important decisions of my life. The business is thriving, family relationships have stabilized, and I have gained confidence and skills that have benefited every aspect of my career and personal development.
New family dynamics had been gradual but ultimately positive. Dad had initially struggled with the reality that his succession plan had been fundamentally flawed, but the business's improved performance had eventually provided evidence that our resistance had been necessary and beneficial. His retirement activities now included volunteer work with the Portland Small Business Development Center, where his experience with both successful business building and problematic succession planning provided valuable insights for other family enterprises. Mom's relationship with me had required more time to heal, as she had taken my legal action as personal rejection of her authority and judgment. However, her growing recognition of my business competence and the strengthened family enterprise had gradually rebuilt our connection on more equal terms. Her retirement pursuits included not only watercolor painting, but also serving as an informal mentor to other business owners' wives who were navigating the complexities of family enterprise transitions. The most unexpected positive outcome had been the strengthening of my relationship with Jessica. Our shared ownership and management responsibilities had forced us to communicate more directly and honestly than we ever had as children or young adults. The process of learning to work together effectively had revealed strengths in each other that family dynamics had previously obscured. Jessica's creativity and customer connection abilities complemented my operational and analytical skills in ways that created genuine synergies. The legal resolution had established precedents that influenced other family business situations within Portland's small business community. Marcus Rodriguez had used our case as a template for helping other families navigate succession planning more equitably, and his practice had grown significantly as word spread about successful outcomes that preserved both business viability and family relationships.
The combination of professional mediation and performance-based ownership transitions had become a model that other family business attorneys had begun adopting. Amanda Foster had documented our case as part of her research on gender dynamics in family business succession, contributing to academic literature that helped other business families recognize and address unconscious biases that could lead to unfair treatment of qualified family members. Her framework for analyzing invisible labor and systematic undervaluation had been adopted by other family business consultants throughout the Pacific Northwest. The personal growth I had experienced through fighting for fair treatment had extended far beyond the business context. The confidence and advocacy skills I had developed had enhanced my performance at Morrison Marketing Solutions, leading to a promotion to regional director that allowed me to work part-time while dedicating more energy to the garden center. The ability to balance corporate career advancement with family business ownership had created the kind of professional satisfaction I had never imagined possible. More importantly, the experience had taught me to recognize and resist exploitation in all areas of my life, not just family business relationships. The patterns of undervaluation and assumed availability that had characterized my parents' expectations had also appeared in workplace situations, romantic relationships, and community volunteer commitments. Learning to establish and maintain appropriate boundaries had improved every aspect of my personal and professional life. The expanded facilities at Chen's Garden Center reflected our increased capabilities and market position. The new greenhouse complex included specialized environments for tropical plants, succulents, and rare orchids that had become profitable niche markets. The workshop and event space Jessica had envisioned had been built to professional standards, hosting everything from children's gardening classes to corporate team-building activities that generated substantial additional revenue streams. Our relationship with suppliers had strengthened as vendors recognized that our improved management structure and financial stability made us more reliable partners. Several growers had begun providing exclusive varieties to Chen's Garden Center, acknowledging our expertise and market position within Portland's competitive landscape. The respect we had earned within the industry validated the professional approach we had adopted following our family crisis. The employee culture at the Garden Center had transformed from the informal family business atmosphere of previous years into a more professional environment that still maintained personal warmth and genuine care for both staff and customers. Clear job descriptions, performance evaluation systems, and advancement opportunities had attracted higher quality employees who appreciated working for an organization with professional standards and growth potential. Jessica's personal development had been as dramatic as her professional growth. The young woman who had once expected business ownership to be handed to her without preparation had become someone who understood that leadership must be earned through competence and sustained through continuous learning. Her romantic relationship with a fellow small business owner had been built on mutual respect and shared understanding of entrepreneurial challenges, creating a partnership that supported her business responsibilities rather than competing with them. The community impact of our business had expanded significantly as our success enabled greater involvement in local economic development initiatives. We had become active members of Portland's Independent Business Alliance, contributing to efforts that supported local entrepreneurs and maintained the city's distinctive character against pressures from national chain stores. Our participation in sustainable business practices earned recognition from environmental organizations that valued our commitment to organic growing methods and local sourcing. The financial security that resulted from fair treatment allowed me to make choices based on personal fulfillment rather than economic necessity. The combination of business ownership dividends and consulting income had provided resources for pursuing interests that had been deferred during years of unpaid labor. Travel, continuing education, and philanthropic activities had enriched my life in ways that validated the decision to fight for appropriate recognition and compensation. The legal precedent established by our case had been cited in several subsequent family business disputes, contributing to evolving recognition that unpaid family member contributions create legitimate claims for ownership participation or financial compensation. Disputes had established him as a regional expert whose reputation attracted clients from throughout the Pacific Northwest. Looking back on the crisis that had seemed so devastating at the time, I could recognize it as one of the most important growth experiences of my life. The professional skills, personal confidence, and boundary-setting abilities I had developed through the conflict had created foundations for success that extended far beyond the immediate business context. The painful process of challenging family expectations had ultimately created more honest and sustainable relationships with everyone involved. The broader lessons from our experience had relevance for anyone dealing with systematic undervaluation or exploitation, whether in family contexts, workplace situations, or personal relationships. The importance of documenting contributions, seeking professional support, and maintaining resolve in the face of emotional pressure had proven essential for achieving fair treatment. The willingness to risk temporary conflict in service of long-term equity had been justified by results that benefited everyone involved. Jessica and I had begun speaking at small business conferences about family enterprise succession planning, sharing our experience as an example of how initial conflicts could be transformed into stronger partnerships through professional mediation and creative problem-solving. Our presentations emphasized that fair treatment and business sustainability were not competing priorities, but complementary goals that supported each other over time. The workshop I was currently observing concluded with enthusiastic applause from participants who had learned not only technical information about orchid care, but also broader principles about plant biology and sustainable gardening practices. Jessica's teaching ability had developed alongside her business skills, creating additional value for customers while generating revenue streams that supported the business's continued growth and innovation. As the afternoon transitioned toward evening and the garden center prepared for closing, I reflected on how different my life had become from the path I had been expected to follow 3 years earlier. Instead of providing unpaid support for someone else's unearned ownership, I had become an equal partner in an enterprise that reflected my contributions and rewarded my efforts appropriately. The transformation had required courage, professional support, and willingness to risk family relationships, but the results had validated every difficult decision along the way. The success of Chen's Garden Center under our shared leadership had demonstrated that family businesses could thrive when succession planning considered merit, preparation, and fairness rather than favoritism or traditional assumptions about family roles. The professional approach we had adopted had strengthened rather than weakened the family connections that mattered most, creating relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. My parents' increasing pride in what Jessica and I had accomplished together provided evidence that initial resistance to change could evolve into appreciation for better outcomes. Their retirement years had been enhanced rather than damaged by the business's improved performance and the family relationships that had become more honest and equitable. The legacy they had built had been preserved and expanded through processes that honored everyone's contributions appropriately. The evening ritual of securing the greenhouse and retail areas had become a shared responsibility that Jessica and I alternated depending on our schedules and other commitments. Tonight was my turn, and I moved through the familiar routines with satisfaction that came from knowing this work was building something I owned, rather than something I was simply supporting. The difference in motivation and engagement was profound, validating the importance of formal recognition for significant contributions. As I locked the main entrance and set the security system, I could see Jessica in the parking lot, talking animatedly on her phone with what appeared to be a potential client interested in large-scale landscaping services. Her professional development had reached the point where she could handle complex negotiations independently, though we still collaborated on major decisions that affected the business's strategic direction. The partnership that had emerged from our legal conflict had become stronger than either individual ownership or the exploitative arrangement our parents had originally proposed.
Walking to my car in the gathering dusk, I felt the deep satisfaction that came from work that was both meaningful and fairly compensated. The plants and customers I had served for 13 years were still part of my daily life, but now that service was building my own financial security and professional reputation, rather than supporting someone else's unearned benefits. The transformation had been painful, but ultimately liberating in ways I was still discovering. The drive home to my Pearl District apartment took me through neighborhoods that had continued evolving during the 3 years since our family crisis. Portland's growth and change reminded me that adaptation and transformation were constant processes, not single events that could be completed and forgotten. The skills I had developed for advocating for fair treatment would undoubtedly be needed again in other contexts as life continued presenting new challenges and opportunities. My apartment had been redecorated to reflect my increased financial resources and personal confidence, but it retained the character and plant-filled atmosphere that had always made it feel like home. The evening ritual of watering and tending my personal collection of exotic plants had become a form of meditation that helped me process the day's activities and prepare for tomorrow's opportunities. The phone call that had started everything 3 years ago seemed catastrophic at the time, but it had ultimately catalyzed changes that had improved every aspect of my life. The courage to challenge unfair treatment, despite the risks and discomfort involved, had created opportunities for growth and success that would never have been possible through passive acceptance of exploitation. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the most difficult decisions lead to the most rewarding outcomes. The following months brought unexpected developments that further validated the path I had chosen. A major Pacific Northwest landscaping company approached us about acquiring Chen's Garden Center, offering a purchase price that reflected not only our physical assets, but also the substantial goodwill and market position we had built. The offer was flattering, but ultimately easy to decline, as Jessica and I had found genuine satisfaction in building something together rather than simply
Maximizing short-term financial returns did prompt important conversations about long-term succession planning and exit strategies. Unlike our parents' haphazard approach to transition planning, Jessica and I began working with professional advisors to document our partnership agreements, establish clear protocols for major decisions, and create frameworks for potential future changes in ownership or management structure. The painful lessons from our family crisis had taught us the importance of addressing these issues proactively rather than avoiding difficult conversations until they became crises. My romantic life had also been transformed by the confidence and self-advocacy skills I had developed through the business conflict. A relationship that had been struggling during the period of family crisis had ended definitively when my partner expressed disapproval of my selfishness in demanding fair treatment from my family. The breakup had been painful at the time, but ultimately revealed incompatibilities that would have caused problems regardless of the business situation. The new relationship that had developed over the past year was built on fundamentally different foundations. David Park, an environmental attorney who specialized in sustainable business practices, had met me through Portland's Green Business Network and been immediately supportive of both my professional achievements and my approach to family boundary setting. His own experience with challenging family expectations about career choices had created shared understanding about the courage required to prioritize personal integrity over familial approval. David's legal expertise complemented my business knowledge in ways that created opportunities for collaboration beyond our romantic partnership. His environmental law practice had begun referring clients to Chen's Garden Center for sustainable landscaping solutions, while our business had become a case study he used when advising other companies about family business governance and succession planning. The professional synergies had strengthened our personal relationship while maintaining appropriate boundaries between our respective careers. The speaking engagements Jessica and I had begun accepting had evolved into a more formal consulting practice focused on family business mediation and succession planning. Our combination of lived experience with professional outcomes had created demand for our insights from family businesses throughout the region. The consulting work provided additional revenue while allowing us to help other families avoid the painful conflicts we had experienced.
One particularly memorable consulting engagement involved a third-generation Italian restaurant family in Seattle, where the founding grandfather had assumed that his eldest grandson would automatically inherit ownership despite the grandson's lack of interest or aptitude for restaurant management. The younger granddaughter had spent years managing operations while her brother pursued other interests, but family tradition dictated that male inheritance took precedence over competence or commitment. Our intervention in that situation had drawn directly from our own experience with challenging unfair succession assumptions. The framework we had developed for documenting contributions, presenting alternatives, and negotiating fair outcomes had proven transferable to other family business contexts. The successful resolution of the Seattle restaurant succession had resulted in a partnership structure similar to our own, with ownership distribution reflecting actual contributions rather than traditional gender expectations. The academic recognition our case had received continued expanding as family business researchers documented the long-term outcomes of our approach. Amanda Foster had published several journal articles analyzing our situation as an example of successful resistance to systemic undervaluation in family enterprises. Her research had been cited by other scholars studying gender dynamics, succession planning, and conflict resolution in small business contexts. The broader impact of our story had extended into policy discussions about family business governance and legal protections for unpaid family member contributions. Marcus Rodriguez had been invited to testify before state legislative committees considering amendments to partnership law that would provide stronger recognition for sweat equity contributions in family enterprises. Our case had become part of the legal precedent supporting such reforms. Jessica's personal transformation had included reconnecting with aspects of her cultural heritage that had been overlooked during her earlier focus on mainstream American social acceptance. Her renewed interest in traditional Asian approaches to plant cultivation had led to specialized workshops about feng shui gardening principles and medicinal plant cultivation that had attracted devoted followings among Portland's diverse Asian American communities. The cultural bridge building that resulted from Jessica's heritage exploration had created new market opportunities while strengthening our family's connections to broader community networks. Our parents' pride in seeing their cultural knowledge valued and transmitted through the business had provided additional healing for relationships that had been strained during the succession conflict. The integration of traditional wisdom with modern business practices had become a distinctive aspect of our brand identity. The employee development programs we had implemented had begun producing unexpected benefits beyond improved customer service and operational efficiency. Several staff members had used the horticultural knowledge and business skills they had gained at Chen's Garden Center to launch their own landscaping companies with our encouragement and support. Rather than viewing these departures as competitive threats, we had embraced them as evidence of our positive impact on people's professional development. The alumni network of former Chen's Garden Center employees had become an informal referral system that benefited everyone involved. Projects too large or specialized for our capabilities were referred to former staff members who had developed complementary expertise, while they directed customers with needs matching our strengths back to us. The collaborative rather than competitive approach had strengthened Portland's overall landscaping and garden services ecosystem. My involvement with Morrison Marketing Solutions had evolved into a part-time consulting arrangement that allowed me to maintain connections with corporate clients while dedicating primary attention to the garden center. The cross-pollination of ideas between corporate marketing strategies and small business operations
had benefited both environments. Several Morrison clients had engaged Chen's Garden Center for office landscaping projects that showcase sustainable business practices while supporting local economic development. The financial independence that had resulted from fair treatment in the business succession had enabled philanthropic activities that reflected my values and interests. A scholarship fund I had established provided educational support for first-generation college students from immigrant families, recognizing the challenges faced by young people trying to balance family expectations with personal aspirations. The scholarship recipients often faced similar conflicts between traditional family roles and individual achievement that I had navigated in my own career. Community garden projects had become another focus of my volunteer efforts, applying the horticultural expertise and organizational skills developed through years of business involvement to initiatives that provided fresh food access and environmental education in underserved neighborhoods. The work was deeply satisfying in ways that connected to the original mission of helping people succeed with plants while addressing social justice issues that had become increasingly important to me. The transformation in my relationship with my parents had continued deepening as they witnessed the positive outcomes of decisions they had initially opposed so vigorously. Dad's involvement with small business mentoring had given him new appreciation for the complexity of succession planning and the importance of considering all stakeholders' interests. His advice to other business owners now emphasized the dangers of assumptions and the value of professional mediation for family conflicts. Mom's evolution had been even more dramatic, as she had begun speaking to women's business groups about recognizing and valuing daughters' contributions to family enterprises. Her own experience with nearly losing a valuable family member through unfair treatment had sensitized her to patterns of gender discrimination that she had previously been unable to see. The speaking engagements had become a form of advocacy that honored the pain of our conflict while preventing similar situations for other families. The evening routine at the garden center had expanded to include security checks of the new facilities and equipment that reflected our growth and success. The greenhouse monitoring systems, irrigation controls, and inventory management technologies had all been upgraded to professional standards that supported our increased scale and complexity. Walking through the facility at closing time provided daily reminders of how far we had traveled from the crisis that had once threatened to destroy everything. The relationship between Jessica and me had evolved beyond business partnership into genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared accomplishment. Our different personalities and approaches to problem solving had become complementary strengths rather than sources of conflict. The trust that had developed through working together effectively had created foundations for collaboration that extended beyond immediate business needs. Regular family dinners had resumed on a modified basis that acknowledged changed relationships while maintaining connections that remained important to everyone involved. The conversations at these gatherings were more honest and direct than they had been before the crisis, with less emphasis on maintaining artificial harmony and more focus on authentic communication about real issues and concerns. The legal settlement that had initially seemed like a painful necessity had proven to be a gift that clarified expectations and created structures for sustainable cooperation. The performance metrics built into Jessica's additional equity opportunities had motivated continuous improvement while providing objective measures of contribution and achievement. The formal agreements had eliminated the ambiguity that had previously created opportunities for exploitation and misunderstanding. Professional development had remained a priority for both Jessica and me, as we recognized that business success required continuous learning and adaptation to changing market conditions. Industry conferences, advanced training programs, and peer learning groups had provided ongoing education while building networks that supported business growth and personal satisfaction. The succession planning principles we had learned through our painful experience had been applied to other aspects of business operations, including employee advancement, vendor relationships, and community partnerships. The emphasis on fairness, transparency, and mutual benefit had become characteristic of how we approached all business relationships, creating a reputation for integrity that attracted high-quality customers, suppliers, and staff members. As I completed the evening security routine and prepared to leave for home, I reflected on how different this moment felt from the same routine 3 years earlier, when I had been contemplating an uncertain future and struggling with the injustice of my family's succession plan. The physical actions were similar, but the emotional context had been transformed completely through the courage to demand fair
Treatment and the persistence to achieve it despite significant obstacles and risks. The drive home through Portland's familiar streets provided opportunity for daily gratitude practice that had become an important part of my evening routine. The ability to feel genuine appreciation for work, relationships, and opportunities that honored my contributions and supported my goals represented a profound shift from the resentment and frustration that had characterized earlier years of undervaluation and exploitation. Tonight's reflection included particular gratitude
for the professional advisors whose expertise and support had made positive outcomes possible, the family members who had eventually found ways to accept and celebrate change dynamics, and the customers and community members whose continued trust in business had validated the decisions Jessica and I had made together. The apartment that awaited me had become a true sanctuary that reflected my values, interests, and achievements without compromise or apology. The space was filled with evidence of a life lived authentically, rather than in service to others' expectations or assumptions. The plants, artwork, books, and personal mementos all represented choices made freely rather than obligations accepted passively. The evening's final ritual of tending my personal plant collection had evolved into a form of meditation that connected me with the natural world while providing time for processing the day's experiences and preparing for tomorrow's opportunities. Each plant represented different aspects of growth, resilience, and adaptation that mirrored my own journey from exploitation to empowerment. The phone that had once brought news of devastating family decisions now carried messages of support, collaboration, and new opportunities that reflected the life I had created through courageous advocacy for my own interests. The transformation from crisis to success had required years of persistent effort, but the results had exceeded every optimistic projection I had dared to imagine during the darkest periods of family conflict. Looking ahead to the challenges and opportunities that would undoubtedly arise in the months and years to come, I felt confident in my ability to navigate them with integrity and effectiveness. The skills developed through standing up for fair treatment had created foundations for continued growth and success that would serve me well regardless of what unexpected developments might emerge. The story that had begun with devastating betrayal and systematic undervaluation had become a testament to the transformative power of refusing to accept unfair treatment, even when resistance required challenging fundamental assumptions about family loyalty and personal obligation. The courage to fight for justice had created not only personal vindication, but also positive changes that had benefited everyone involved in ways that passive acceptance never could have achieved. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.